Welcome everybody to another one of my reviews of locomotives in my collection. In this video I'm going to be looking at a couple of Wrenn 8F280s that I've refurbished, repainted, resprayed, rebranded and retransferred. Now what's actually prompted me to do this, because I've had these locomotives up before, and those of you, there may be some of you who remember from a few years back that I used to do some slow running sessions with 8Fs and castles that I had modified and repainted just for demonstration purposes and to showcase the, shall we say, some of the improvements that I think I made to them. Now, what's prompted me with this one is the fact that I came across recently a Wrenn 8F in maroon. I've never seen this before, so I investigated it a bit further, and then I stopped when I saw the price. It was £800, and I thought, no, I'm not doing that. So what I thought I'd do is actually do one myself, and here is the result. So as you can see, I completely repainted this locomotive. It's got exactly the same running number as the Wrenn model, that's 8016, and the gold and black shaded LMS lettering on the tender, and the spacing is exactly the same as it is on the Wrenn locomotive. Needless to say, this didn't cost me anything like £800, but it did present me with some problems because I'd never tackled anything as quite involved as this one. And oh yes, you can just mask it off and spray it over. Yeah, it's easier said than done. Well, at least for me anyway. But anyway, here's the end result, and you can hopefully judge for yourselves what you think about this. But I'll move in a bit closer so you can see some of the detailing alterations that I've made to this, which you won't find on the Wrenn original. So if we look at the front, as you can see, I've added the detail there. My bright red buffer beam and the metal buffer heads, along with the vacuum pump, vacuum pipe, and LMS lamps, and hopefully you can see, keep this still, the builder's plate that I've put on there, which is in sort of an etched metal. Adds a nice touch. Running number on the front, 8016, shed plate there. So if I can just try and slowly eliminate the shake, take the camcorder along the top of the boiler, you can see for yourself. The other thing I've done, if you can see on the cab, I've glazed the windows. That's another little added touch. The brass metal safety valves, they get sprayed over, so I just paint them over with a brass, metallic brass paint. Now, up until this locomotive, I've had quite straightforward methods of getting the paint off these locomotives, and stripping them back to the bare metal, as it were, which was to take the body off, take the handrails off, give them a good clean, and insert them into some caustic soda, and give it about an hour, and it brushes away easily. Well, not on this one. This locomotive I picked up, it was very cheap, and it was very well worn, and it was in a very poor condition. It was quite, it was dirty, filthy, or the wheels were filthy. All the bright work was tarnished. So I stripped it down, gave it a really good clean, brought up all the bright work, and even internally, the motion bracket which goes right across from both cylinders, I've shined that up so every bit of this locomotive, in terms of its bright metalwork, sparkles like new again. But actually trying to strip the paint off the bodywork took about 3 or 4, I must have done about half a dozen attempts to try and get it off. And there are some areas where it is a wee bit rough looking. I don't know if you can see on the top of the cab there. Now why that should be the case, I don't know, but anyway, there it is. So that was my first attempt at doing a repaint and masking things off. So it's turned out reasonably well, I think, and the added enhancements just give it an extra lift again. So as far as I'm concerned, it's better than the Wrenn original, and it didn't cost me anything as much either. Going around to the back of the tender, you might be able to see, let's see if I can get in a bit closer there, that I've put the etched brass metal plates on the back of the tender, which says LMS, what the tender number is, when it was built, or what classification tender, and finally the oval plate at the bottom which says something like 4,000 gallons. And there's also the brake pipe on the back. As you can see, I've retained the original buffers on the Wrenn chassis there, because they're less conspicuous than on the front of the locomotive, and they're good enough, but I wanted to do something special with the front of the locomotive, hence the new buffers. So there it is. Now, the reason for the high price of this locomotive is that I believe there were 260 odd made. That was the total number. So that probably explains or warrants the enormous price for it. But as I say, this one wasn't. This is one I've done myself. I've followed it more or less exactly as the Wrenn original. I've added a bit of silver paint to the cylinder covers at the front there, just to give it a bit of enhancement. And of course, you can see quite clearly the much finer scale brass buffer heads on the engine. So that's 8016, and we'll see it go around shortly. But let's have a look at an 8F I did earlier. So in true Bloom Peter fashion, here is one I did earlier, and I had no trouble lifting off the paint on this one. It just came away without any difficulty at all. There was it didn't require a lot of work, just the immersion in caustic soda. And you will be aware that Wrenn produced a number of these 8Fs with LMS numbers and LMS insignia, and this is one which I've done myself. It does not correspond to any Wrenn model in terms of the number or the lettering, and I feel that this actually looks better than any Wrenn locomotive in terms of the way the numbers and the numbers and the lettering have been applied. Needless to say, the transfers are not cheap, but they're affordable. Again, on this one, you can see that I've got the plates on the back of the tender. They're not easy to put on, to apply those, because as you can probably see, there's rivets underneath them. Can't do very much about that. There was no way I was going to try and file those down. Again, you can see that the cab has a glazed window. and the riveting is very fine on this. Stands out well. Let's move that back a bit. We'll have a look at the top, and the application of the spraying paint. You can see for yourself it's gone on well. This one was in quite good condition. It was a very reasonable condition. In fact, it was one of those when you look at it and you think, oh, do I want to do anything to this, because it looks pretty good anyway. But as I've got quite a number of these, I thought, well, no, I can do something with this, something a bit different. There again, you can see the buffers, metal head buffers that I've applied, the lamps. It's also got the LMS builder's plate on it. LMS number nicely applied to the smoke box door, together with the shed code. The old little overplate at the bottom there. That was an LMS, I say innovation, it was an LMS practice, that's more accurately, which was applied to all locomotives on British Railways after nationalisation, and it made sense. And also LMS practice was the proper cast number plates to be placed prominently on the smoke box door. None of this painting it on the buffer beam afterthought. Never really rated that personally myself. But yeah, quite pleased the way this looks, even if I do say so myself. Of course, these locomotives need no introduction. I did an overview of all of these about 6 months back now, all the ones in my collection. As far as I'm concerned, this is the finest model of a 280 still in existence at the moment by any manufacturer, at least in 00 gauge. This came out in 1957, introduced by Wrenn, Hornby 00, and obviously then Wrenn acquired the tooling and continued the production. And it was to be about another 35 years before another 280 was attempted by a manufacturer, and then that was Hornby, and that came out in the 1990s, one of the last of the Margate ones, and it really didn't cut it for me. It was all right, but there was it just didn't have the presence. I have to say that the China produced one is an absolutely fabulous model, and does it match this? I would say that the Hornby 00 Wrenn one shades it just, but the recent Hornby one is quite a splendid model. I think there's one in sight. Yeah, there it is, under the girder bridge. My word, that looks fine. That's the weathered one. As you can see, everything's a little bit sharper and finer on it. But take a lot to beat this. As a locomotive, these were outstandingly successful. I think it was about 852 or something like that were built by the LMS, a lot of them for war service. Every single locomotive works in the country built them for war, were ordered to build them for war purposes. They got sent out to Persia to haul supply trains in from around Suez right up through Persia to Russia's through heavy mountainous regions to Russia's back door to keep Stalin in the war. I've got pictures of these things battling their way up some horrific grades against gigantic mountains, and they're dwarfed. Testimony to these great engines. Little sideline on them is that when they used to clear out the fire grate and empty the ash pan, sheets of glass used to come out, gives you some idea of the conditions. Eventually 666 of these returned to work on British railways, and just to remind you, steam finished in July-August 1968, and in March 1965, this is a fact, 630 of these engines were still at work. And that is what, about 3 years before the end of steam. So that's telling you just how good these locomotives were. So anyway, we'll do a quick run round, and we'll just see these as they move around my layout. Okay.